Welcome everybody. My name is Ian Gillespie and I'm going to be walking you through Backupify's O365 backup product today. Today we're going to be focusing on the technology itself. If you're interested in how to implement this product, there are other videos available to you. I will call out, however, I always like to mention that this is a cloud-to-cloud OAuth 2 based backup platform. We will never ingest any of your O365 credentials within it. From here, I do want to start by talking a little bit about the seat management side of things. Now, we do break seat management down into three core areas. The first is going to be on the user side. Users is going to focus on the OneDrive as well as Exchange portions of the O365 platform. And there's three major ways that you can add users to Backupify. First, you can add them on a one-by-one basis, or you can add them by CSV. These two options give you real granular control over who's being backed up within the platform, but at the end of the day, they're pretty manual. So what most organizations are doing is leveraging the auto add functionality. And if you turn on auto add, we're going to pull in all licenses that exist within your O365 tenant today, as well as any new licenses you provision in the future. This makes the system a closed loop, so you don't have to worry about, oh, did I add these users to the backup, or did I only add them on the O365 side? Again, just makes things very simple and easy to manage. In addition to users, we also can back up shared and resource mailboxes. They can be added one by CSV, or the auto add functionality will pull all of these in as well. Microsoft doesn't charge for them, so neither do we, which is a really nice value out of the platform. From here, we'll move on to the SharePoint side of things. And you'll see for SharePoint site management, it's going to look a little bit different. This view will actually be rolling out on the user side of things as well. You'll notice that we've got 63% of our sites backing up, as well as 37% unprotected at the moment. If I come down here, I can search for specific sites of interest. I can also filter based upon the different state that they might be in. I can turn backups on or off on a granular basis, and I can protect all and turn auto add on. So just like you did on the user side, if you want to make sure that all SharePoint content gets pulled in regardless of who's creating it or when, this is a really great way to do that, again, by turning on auto add. From here, we can dive into the Teams portion of the platform, and you'll see that here we have a very similar layout to what I showed you a moment ago on the site side of things. 100% of my sites are currently backing up, and I can turn backups on or off for each individual team as I see fit. Very straightforward. Again, we do have the protect all and auto add functionality in order to back these up all at once, or to ensure that the backups are ongoing as people create new teams. Now, once you've added content to the platform, I do like to call out a couple of different items around how the system will perform. We do need to do an initial backup. That's us pulling the data out of these user accounts, SharePoint sites, Teams, etc., into our platform. On average, we see this takes a couple of days, but for more information, I would recommend scheduling a demonstration with the sales engineer because there's a lot of factors that play into this. Whether that's the number of users, the amount of data, number of SharePoint sites, or even other factors beyond that. So again, for a more specific estimate of how long that initial ingest will take, I do always recommend reaching out to a sales engineer for a new demonstration. You'll see here on this page, as data ingests, that we've got some basic storage totals, as well as other information that might be interesting to you. The most important one here is the not backed up within 24 hours field. This is going to be your one-stop shop to determine if any users have failed to back up. You can see I keep one user in this state on the Exchange side of things right here, and so ultimately I know that I need to investigate that further if something's gone awry. What's really cool about this platform is that we do feature automated retry logic as well as on-call engineers monitoring the environment to ensure that you don't really have to troubleshoot any of this. This should be taken care of automatically on your behalf by our teams. From here, we can start to talk a little bit about the recovery side of things. I'm going to go ahead and start with Exchange. When I click into the service, you'll see that I get four major options along the top. The first is the users, which is going to be the user side of things, right? Which users I may want to click into in order to perform a recovery. We have search, which will allow me to search across multiple users at once. You can see below that I'm returning results from multiple users. Some may just be hidden on another page. For example, we have Monet, Joe, and Lawrence. While we aren't an e-discovery tool, it does give you some flexibility to search across the entire environment quickly and easily. Exports and restores tabs will allow you to see any exports or restores that are going on currently. So if you were to kick off a restore to a user, for example, which we'll show you how to do in a few moments, this would give you the ability to see where that restore stands, and if it's completed, notify the user of that fact. Now, back to the users page, this is where you'll spend most of your time. I can search for a user of interest by name or by email and dive into their account. You'll notice that we don't just back up the emails, but all of the folder structure and organizational hierarchy is maintained. So whether I'm restoring just a singular folder or an entire mailbox, all of that structure that your users have spent time setting up will be maintained through that process. I can, of course, dive in and get more granular down to the individual email level. And of course, I can search for data on an individual user level as well. It's worth noting that Boolean operators such as and or can be leveraged. They just need to be capitalized. Our system can then allow you to select individual emails, folders, what have you, whatever needs to be restored, and I can push this data back to the original user. That's going to handle my standard deletion events, right? Oops, somebody deleted something, malicious deletion, or even the scenario in which ransomware has hit the environment. We'll talk a little bit more about ransomware further on in the demonstration. In addition to restoring to the original user, I can also push this data to another user of my choosing. Super useful as people come and go from the organization. So let's say, for example, Joe was working on the Microsoft project. He leaves in the middle of that project, and Monet is going to take over. Well, I could do a search for Microsoft and restore those search results over to Monet. With only about a minute's worth of work here, I've provided a scoped restore of the data likely to be critical to Monet moving forward. All of this only took a matter of moments and ensures that you're not only sending on what's relevant, but also holding back anything that might be sensitive in Joe's account that we wouldn't want to pass on to another user. In addition to restore, we do have the ability to export data out. This will allow you to download it to the local computer. For mail, this doesn't get used that frequently. Kind of a pain to download it, open it up in a mail client, and then sync it back up to the cloud. But there may be scenarios where you want to dump this data to a thumb drive or something along those lines to hand on to another team, and we can absolutely support that. The Backup Now button will allow for on-demand backups as you see fit. This is in addition to the 3 backups a day that we provide. Generally speaking, this is used in scenarios where someone's being let go, and you want to make sure you have a clean copy of the most recent data, just in case they go on a deletion spree on their way out the door. The snapshot tool will allow you to access the different backup points that we've taken. We take 3 backup points a day. You can roll back to those different points in time in order to recover whatever you need. Again, whether it's been lost, deleted, encrypted, or anything else that may have happened to the data. The last thing I'll note in Exchange before we move on is that we don't just back up mail, but we also back up notes, contacts, calendar, and tasks. This may be slightly repetitive, but you'll see for each of these areas, I can restore anything from the top level all the way down to an individual contact card, or with calendar, for example, all the way down to an individual calendar event. And of course, tasks can be restored down to the original task level as well. All of these items can be restored to the original user or to someone else, just like we saw before in the mail side of things. Next up, we'll take a look at OneDrive, and you'll see here that it's going to look identical to what we saw a moment ago. You've got users, search, exports, and restores along the top. I can search for a user of interest and dive into their account. You'll also notice again that the folder structure is maintained, so I can grab individual items or entire folders. I can dive into any folders of interest as well, and I can then search for data if I need to there too. I can restore this content back to the original user or to someone else for the exact same reasons we talked about a moment ago. These permissions refer to the access control list that Microsoft talks about on their side of things. However, you can strip these out if you would like. Usually, you would want to maintain the permissions through the restore process, but there are scenarios where you may want to restore content of interest that doesn't have permissions that you want. Backup Now will allow for on-demand backups as you see fit, and of course, the snapshot tool to access previous backup points. Now, I mentioned before that the snapshot tool is going to be your primary methodology for ransomware recovery. The way that ransomware primarily interacts with O365 is on the OneDrive and SharePoint side of things. The way this works is someone clicks on something they shouldn't. It's a story we know all too well at this point. From there, malware installs on the local computer and begins encrypting everything on the machine. This includes any content that your users have synced from OneDrive or SharePoint down to that computer. And it's worth noting, people tend not to share 100% of the content they own within OneDrive or SharePoint down to that machine. The reason that this is important is because it often leads to a selective encryption event where only portions of their OneDrive or SharePoint sites are encrypted. This means that Microsoft's bulk rollback tools like OneDrive Restore aren't going to do what you want because they're not a granular selection option. It's basically an all or nothing selection. More importantly, the OneDrive Restore and all of Microsoft's other tools also focus heavily on version history. The reason that this is a problem is that the encryption event via the sync client does not create a new version. So for items that don't have version histories, perhaps PDFs or JPEGs, Well, those items, there's nothing to roll back to, and as a result, they're not recoverable with Microsoft's native tools. So with our tool, it's going to very much mirror what you would do with an on-prem system. Essentially, you clean out the production environment, you roll back in time to a previous point before the encryption event, select what you want to recover. You also have the option to recover the entire snapshot, meaning all of the data the user had at this date and time. Click Restore, you're pretty much all set. From here, we can take a look at SharePoint, and you'll notice that SharePoint, again, will look very much the same. The one difference here is that we've got sites instead of users. SharePoint is obviously site-based, so this makes a little bit more sense. We focus on the content layer within SharePoint, and there's 5 major areas that we focus on. They're going to be the document libraries, site lists, site pages, site assets, and site templates. Now, these 5 areas can be restored from the top level, be it all pages or an entire list, entire document library, or I can dive in and get a little bit more granular, whether I'm selecting individual folders or even just individual documents of interest. I can search for data, I can restore to the original SharePoint site, which will handle standard deletion events, or I can push to another SharePoint site of my choosing. Super useful if you're ever deprecating one site in favor of another or want to consolidate 10 sites into one, allows you to shift the data via the back end. Export to download this content. Backup now for on-demand backups, and the snapshot tool to access previous backup points. In regards to Teams, it'll look very similar to the SharePoint side of things, which makes sense, right? Teams uses SharePoint as a backend for much of its, or many of its components. So you'll see here I can dive into a team of interest, and we have 3 major areas here. The first is content. Content's going to be everything that can be found on the Teams site. Right? So I can go in and recover documents associated with specific channels, or I can go into Calendar and restore specific calendar events associated with those channels as well. Conversations is a little bit different. Conversations is going to be the conversation history associated with each channel, and I can select items of interest and I can export these items down. So unlike the content or calendar portions where I restore directly back to the teams, conversations are going to be a download. And the reason for this is twofold. First of all, there are some limitations around what Microsoft allows via the API today. And second of all, essentially, when we're dealing with conversations, usually it's more of a litigation concern. What did this person say at a given time within this channel? Was it negative or positive? Something perhaps we want to do an investigation around. This allows you to download the content and view it on your computer, search through it, find what you need in order to determine if some action must be taken. Finally, I do want to touch on the admin section of the platform. So there's 3 major areas here. First is manage administrators. This is where you can add admins of interest. So anybody you want to be able to access this platform, perform restores, etc. You can add as many as you would like. There's no specific charge on this of any type. Reporting will allow you to see what types of events the system is taking, right? Are we performing backups, restores, exports, etc. Additionally, user actions will allow you to see what actions your users have been doing in here. So this is going to be an audit log of your administrators. Finally, we have the Settings tab, and this is going to allow you to set your retention period as well as an O365 license cap if you want to cap the number of users that are getting pulled into the platform. And with that, that brings us to the end of our demonstration of the O365 product. Thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, please feel free to schedule a demo with a sales engineer.